Sometimes when we think about detective movies, we imagine dark crime scenes, intense interrogations, and serious investigators chasing dangerous criminals. But Korean cinema has a fun way of flipping that expectation completely. Instead of making everything serious and tense, many Korean detective films mix thrilling investigations with hilarious comedy. The result is something that keeps you excited about the mystery while also making you laugh out loud. Today we're talking about 6 Korean detective comedy films that perfectly combine action, crime, and humor. The Accidental Detective, Runway Cop, Veteran, Midnight Runners, Miss and Mrs. Cops, and Extreme Job. What makes these films special is that they prove solving crimes doesn't always have to look cool or perfect. Sometimes detectives make mistakes, get into ridiculous situations, and still somehow save the day. And honestly, that makes the stories even more entertaining. As we go through these films, think about this question. Which kind of detective do you enjoy watching more? The serious genius type or the chaotic and funny type? The Accidental Detective, 2015. Let's start with The Accidental Detective, a film that shows what happens when someone with detective dreams accidentally ends up in the middle of a real investigation. The story follows Kang Dae-man, played by Kwon Sang-woo, who has always dreamed of becoming a detective. Unfortunately, he repeatedly fails the physical tests required to join the police force. Instead, he runs a small bookstore and spends his free time writing crime analysis on his blog. Even though he isn't officially part of law enforcement, Dae-man loves discussing cases with his friend Soo-jun, a police officer. But things take a dramatic turn when Soo-jun is suddenly accused of murdering his own wife. Refusing to believe his friend is capable of such a crime, Dae-man decides to investigate the case himself. During the investigation, he teams up with a veteran detective named No, played by Sung Dong-il. What follows is a series of chaotic and hilarious moments as the two try to solve the mystery together. What makes the film fun is the contrast between Dae-man's enthusiasm and his lack of real detective experience. Personally, I think this concept works because it plays with the idea that ordinary people sometimes notice things professionals overlook. It also raises an interesting question. If you had strong analytical skills like Dae-man, would you try solving a crime on your own? Or would you leave everything to the police? Runway Cop, 2012. Next is Runway Cop, which might have one of the most ridiculous undercover missions in detective movie history. The film follows Detective Cha, played by Kang Ji-hwan. He's a talented investigator, but he's also a man who clearly doesn't care about his appearance at all. One day, he receives a mission that sounds almost impossible for someone like him. In order to investigate a drug trafficking operation connected to the fashion industry, he must go undercover as a professional runway model. Yes, a detective who barely cares about fashion suddenly has to walk the runway in designer clothes. But before he can even attempt that, he's told he needs to lose about 20 kilograms. Watching Detective Cha struggle through intense workouts, fashion training, and awkward modeling lessons becomes one of the film's biggest sources of comedy. What I find funny about this movie is the idea that being a detective sometimes requires skills you would never expect. You might imagine investigators studying evidence or interrogating suspects, but here we have a detective learning how to pose confidently on a fashion runway. It also makes you wonder how far someone would go to complete a mission. Would you be willing to completely transform your appearance and lifestyle just to catch a criminal? Veteran, 2015. Veteran takes a slightly different tone compared to the previous films. While it still contains comedic moments, it also delivers a strong action story. The film focuses on Seo Do-chol, a tough and fearless detective played by Hwang Jung-min. He becomes determined to investigate a powerful and arrogant young businessman named Tae-oh, portrayed by Yoo Ah-in. Tae-oh comes from an extremely wealthy family and believes his money and influence make him untouchable. What makes the story compelling is the clash between these two characters. On one side, you have a detective who strongly believes in justice. On the other side is someone who thinks the law doesn't apply to him. Even though the movie deals with serious issues like corruption and abuse of power, it still manages to include humor through the detective team's interactions and their creative ways of pursuing the case. Personally, I think films like Veteran resonate with audiences because they tap into a universal frustration. Many people have experienced situations where powerful individuals seem to escape consequences. Watching a determined detective challenge that system can feel incredibly satisfying. But I'm curious what you think. Do you enjoy crime stories more when they focus on realistic social issues like corruption? Or do you prefer lighter mysteries that are purely entertaining? Midnight Runners, 2017. Now we move on to Midnight Runners, one of the most popular Korean action comedies in recent years. The film follows two police academy students, Park Ki-jun, played by Park So-jun, and Kang Hee-yeol, played by Kang Han-il. The two students have very different personalities, but they develop a strong friendship while studying to become police officers. Although they're still inexperienced and not exactly top students, they genuinely want to help people. One night while walking through the city, they witness a young woman being kidnapped right in front of them. Instead of ignoring the situation or waiting for official authorities, they decide to chase down the criminals themselves. What follows is an intense yet comedic investigation as the two inexperienced students try to solve the case using the limited knowledge they've learned at the academy. The chemistry between Park So-jun and Kang Han-il is a big part of what makes this film so entertaining. Their characters constantly argue, make mistakes, and panic in stressful situations, but their determination to save the victim keeps them moving forward. I think Midnight Runners perfectly captures the excitement of youthful courage. Sometimes people act not because they're fully prepared, but because they simply believe it's the right thing to do. Miss and Mrs. Cops, 2019. Miss and Mrs. Cops brings something refreshing to the detective comedy genre by focusing on two female investigators. The story centers on Park Mi-young, played by Ra Mi-ran, and Cho Ji-hae, played by Lee Sung-kyung. Mi-young used to be a respected detective, but now works in a quieter administrative position. Ji-hae, on the other hand, is a younger officer with a bold and energetic personality. When they are forced to work together on a serious case involving illegal videos and sexual crimes, their clashing personalities lead to both conflict and comedy. Despite their constant arguments, the two women eventually form a powerful partnership while investigating the case. The movie balances humor with an important message about justice and protecting victims. What makes the film stand out is how it shows strong female characters handling both action and investigation while still maintaining comedic moments. Extreme Job, 2019. Finally, we have Extreme Job, a film that became one of the highest-grossing Korean movies ever. The story follows a team of detectives who are assigned to investigate a dangerous drug trafficking organization. In order to monitor the suspects more closely, the detectives decide to open a fried chicken restaurant as their undercover base. But something completely unexpected happens. Their chicken recipe becomes incredibly popular, and soon, the restaurant is packed with customers every day. Instead of focusing on their investigation, the detectives suddenly find themselves running a successful fried chicken business. Balancing their undercover mission with managing a booming restaurant creates countless hilarious situations. Extreme Job works so well because the premise is both ridiculous and believable at the same time. Watching detectives struggle with cooking orders while secretly tracking criminals is comedy gold. Looking at these 6 films together, it's clear that Korean cinema has mastered the art of blending crime stories with humor. Whether it's an amateur detective solving a mystery, an undercover cop becoming a runway model, or investigators accidentally running a famous fried chicken restaurant, each story reminds us that even serious professions can have absurd and funny moments. But now I want to hear your thoughts. Which of these detective comedy films would you watch first? And do you think comedy actually makes crime stories more enjoyable? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, sometimes the best detectives on screen are the ones who make us laugh while solving the case.